Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and it's amazing that your attention is still held in this room, so congratulations, you've made it this far. I've worked with the integration branch since the fall of 2009 on community connections specifically, and this is really an area that's near and dear to my heart. For many years before that, I was a host program volunteer, and so really happy to be here today and talk about this area of programming. And I'll try to refer to IRCC, IRC, and not CIC, if I can remember. Clicker, green. There we go. I won't spend time on that outline because I know that we're holding it tight to 15 minutes. So as we know, immigration and integration are areas of shared jurisdiction between federal, provincial, and territorial governments. And the settlement program fulfills obligations under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, specifically to promote the successful integration of permanent residents into Canada, while recognizing that integration really involves mutual obligations, and this is the key piece for new immigrants and for Canadian society. So services are delivered through a network of partnerships with many of you here in the room. And for 14-15, IRCC had almost 800 contribution agreements with organizations across Canada, with the exception of Quebec, and that's for more than 500 service providers. So we have these national calls for proposals, which many of you are very familiar with, providing funding through contribution agreements. And that's a really diverse array of organizations that are involved in that process. And overall, we've seen a trend toward consistency and coordination at a national level. And CIC is certainly recognized as a leader in settlement, yet challenges remain, and we've heard so much about that in the last number of days. So unemployment, underemployment, low literacy and language skills, weak social and employment networks. And barriers, as we know, are particularly acute for vulnerable groups. So refugees, youth, seniors, newcomers with disabilities, LGBTQ community. And the National Settlement Council earlier this year had requested a policy discussion with the integration branch. And what came out of that conversation really informed the last national call for proposals. And dialogue continues within our branch about how we can best meet the needs of these multi-barriered clients. So, many of you are very familiar with the settlement program, but for those of you who are less familiar, we provide a wide variety of funding for initiatives with the goal of supporting newcomers to be fully engaged, to be actively engaged in the economic, social, political, and cultural life of Canada. So that happens in 5 areas of direct service, and then indirect services, which includes the local immigration partnerships and immigrant employment councils. And I'll be focusing specifically today on community connections. So I won't go into great detail about our stakeholders and partners. It's clear to many of you, provinces and territories, municipalities, a wide variety of service providers, employers, and as I mentioned, the LIPS and the NSC. So from CIC's perspective, integration truly is a two-way street, and this is really key in underlying the policy, is that it requires adjustment on the part of both newcomers and communities in which they settle, and there's a number of rights and responsibilities on either side. So that informs all of our work. We're ultimately serving newcomers as clients, but it's really important to consider the absorptive capacity of communities. So that forms the basis of our work, and it really was driven forward by research that happened in 2010 that CIC had commissioned from Vicki Esses, Mayor Burstein, Leah Hamilton, and Caroline Bennett on the 17 characteristics of a welcoming community. And from a research perspective, we might look back and say that 2010 is rather dated, but in truth, this research has really informed our policy approach and has guided priority setting for years to come, and I still refer to this report, so thank you. Thank you for that research. And in particular, I'll highlight social engagement opportunities, opportunities for use of public space and recreation facilities, positive attitudes towards immigrants, cultural diversity, the presence of newcomers in the community, and networks within and between groups being really key to that approach. So way of background about community connections, it's often thought of as one of 5 direct service components, and I view it a little bit differently as a set of cross-stream initiatives. So we're looking to aim aiming to build bridges between newcomers and communities, and this being a really essential thread that influences all aspects of settlement and all aspects of integration. So projects are funded to support newcomers in making connections and forming those really essential networks within the various dimensions of Canadian society, while also engaging communities to welcome newcomers and support their full participation. So this approach allows newcomers to develop a sense of belonging while enabling institutions and community members to better understand the contributions that they can make and the challenges that they face. Okay, so if you're curious, settlement program expenditures for 14-15, just in the area of community connections, amounted to $70 million, and a majority of service provider organizations would deliver some form of community connections programming as part of their contribution agreements, and that's often delivered in tandem with information and orientation activities. Yeah, so give you a clearer idea of some of the funding that's ongoing. We're supporting a range of different approaches based on client needs and local contexts in 3 different areas of direct service delivery. And obviously there's a lot of indirect services that help to shape and build welcoming and inclusive communities, but for these purposes I'm focused on these 3 areas of direct support. So we have settlement support in public institutions, so newcomers are receiving services in public spaces to improve access, address systemic barriers, and enhance the capacity of institutions to actually address the needs of newcomers. Community-based group events, so newcomers are participating in cross-cultural activities to develop a sense of attachment and belonging as they learn about their new community. And finally, we have targeted matching and networking, so longtime Canadians and established immigrants volunteer to assist newcomers in need of settlement and integration support. I'd like to spend a while on this slide, the importance of volunteer engagement. Sometimes this is a bit overlooked, and community connections in particular really owes its success to the support and commitment of community members from across Canada. So activities really rely in large part on dedicated volunteers. So not just human resources, but financial, in-kind resources from established immigrants, from long-time Canadians, from local organizations and public institutions. And we see that the involvement of culturally competent volunteers from the host community provides newcomers with bridging social capital through more diverse social networks, and this ultimately translates to settlement success in other areas. So I've got my 5-minute time limit here. I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but I'd like to focus on, there we go. Settlement workers in schools and some of what we see coming out of that program. Swiss is able to serve the whole family and ensure that everyone is drawn into a settlement continuum, with schools actually functioning as a mini welcoming center. We're reaching vulnerable populations, namely at-risk youth and families without network of support. Services are able to be tailored and specialized to be culturally appropriate and meet individual needs. And we're also improving cross-cultural understanding between all parties and enhancing the capacity of teachers and the school system to actually address opportunities and challenges. Some findings for students, but I'll let you maybe review the presentation on your own. I wanted to provide an example that I think is really key in the area of community connections. We've had a shift more to an outcomes-based approach with a modernized approach, as many of you know, and this has led to a refinement of activities. So we see a shift from more passive to more active activities. So instead of groups coming together to watch a hockey game, you're having a basketball tournament with police services, which I think is a real shift. So service providers are delivering a variety of innovative programming, but I wanted to highlight the Community Cup, which started in Ottawa in 2005 as a small soccer tournament for newcomers that was organized by the Catholic Centre for Immigrants. And it's gone on to now have 2,000 visitors and over 150 volunteers. So they're welcoming, connecting, integrating newcomers through sport and through volunteerism. So promoting healthy living, cultural sharing, network building, civic engagement in a really fun, dynamic way. And there's some more information there at the bottom. Finally, in terms of direct service areas, there's a number of different activities that are funded under matching and networking. So it could be needs-based mentoring, coaching and networking, presentations, workshops, discussion forums, conversation circles, workplace language learning, homework clubs, after-school programs, youth leadership, and peer support activities. And in this space and time, I certainly can't do justice to the variety of activities that are happening on the ground, but if anyone wants more information, I'm happy to be in touch at a later date. Yeah, and I'm also encouraged by greater recognition in recent years of the importance of social connections. Certainly 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, working on this policy file, that wasn't the case. And some of you may be familiar, there was a pan-Canadian settlement outcome survey that it was administered by BC Stats to over 20,000 newcomers nationally in 2012. And out of that came a federal, provincial, territorial commitment to an action plan called Helping Immigrants Succeed. And social connections is one of 4 key areas within that. So we now have a template for the scan, and it's been developed. We're collecting information beginning in 2016 about promising practices, and then analysis will begin in terms of what are the gaps, what are the unmet needs, and resulting from that in bilateral and multilateral activities to facilitate social connections and build welcoming communities. So definitely some opportunities for collaboration. Thank you. And there was a presentation over the weekend on performance measurement strategy, so I won't go into great detail about that. Just to say that attribution is an ongoing challenge for us in the area of community connections. And we really look forward to having a summative evaluation completed by March of 2017. And that's for a 5-year period from 11-12 to 16-17. And it's for all settlement services, so direct, indirect, program development and management, with a focus on client outcomes. So that'll certainly provide more information. And I know that the shift from different data collection systems to iCare hasn't been easeful. I worked on the transition between Otis, which was used here in Ontario, to iCare, and so I certainly understand the challenges with that, but it is meaningful for us to have one system where we can actually reflect upon these outcomes to inform this upcoming evaluation. And I know this is everyone's favorite slide, but that gives you an idea about where Community Connections is placed within the broader settlement program, if you're less familiar. And just to say in closing that Community Connections remains a very important component of the settlement program, and especially a key area of activity with the effort to resettle Syrian refugees. So IRCC is always looking for new and innovative ways to improve community connections. And just to reiterate, if you'd like to be in touch with me, I'm always happy to dialogue with you, and if you have programming examples that we're unaware of that may not have been able to have been captured in the annual project performance reports or in iCare, I love to hear about what's happening in your local communities. So thank you.